You know, here we go, Travel Future Podcast. Today we have Heather Wand. If you're watching this, um, yes, Heather Wand is in the USA. I'm in Switzerland. For short introductions, my name is Adriatica. I'm a body artist. I tattoo people. I paint people's body. I paint also canvas. I'm a breath worker and a makeup artist. And I also dance and I teach dance. Um, and I this is part of my research. So this is a public research, and it might it serve others. Um, Today we have Heather Ward, and her stage name is Nisaa. She's an instructor, performer, and a researcher of Egyptian dance. She also wrote two books. Um, Egyptian Bellydance and Transition is the name of one of them, and Raqs in the City is the name of the second one. She has a really interesting body of research around those themes. Welcome, Heather. I'm so happy that you're here. Tell us a bit about your work and you.
Oh, I'm so happy to talk with you. Yeah, so for the people who know me, I'm a big nerd. I have been involved in Egyptian and other Swana dances for a long time. But really, my focus has been on Egypt, and specifically, I've been very interested in researching, number one, the history of the dance form that now is recognized as Raqs Sharqi, but also in more recent years, I've been doing a lot of work with traditional entertainers in Egypt and trying to bring the perspectives of traditional artists more into the spotlight in the international belly dance industry.
Beautiful. What are some of your favorite contemporary Egyptian artists?
Oh, there's so many. You
Okay,
know,
five, three.
okay. As far as, do you want me to keep it to the ones that nobody knows about in the industry? Because those are my favorite people. Um, I will start right off the bat with my friend Retta Henkesh, because we're friends, but also we've been doing a lot of work together. Retta is a tabla player from a very, very well-known and well-respected musical family from Muhammad Ali Street. Muhammad Ali Street in Cairo is the street of art. For generations, it was the focal point of music and dance and, generally speaking, the arts in Cairo. And I have tremendous respect for him because he carries that legacy of his family and of Muhammad Ali. Not to mention, he's an incredible drummer. So I have to list him first. My God, all the others could be all my various Gawazi informants. I can shout out Khairia Mazen, of course, the famous Gazia from the Banat Mazen family in Luxor, and Engem Ibrahim, who is from her grandmother, the legacy of her grandmother, Fauzia Ibrahim, also in Luxor, and in the Nile Delta. My primary informant there is Aida Taha, who in her heyday, she was dancing in the 70s and 80s. And her aunt, who I had the privilege to meet, Nazira, who was Gazia from the village of Sunbat, active in the 60s, 70s. So I like to shout out those artists most of all, because those are the folks who have lived and breathed these arts their whole lives, but remain largely unknown at the international level.
Mhm. I hope that the first one, the tabla play, he's not associated with Muhammad. Was it Muhammad Ali who prohibited belly dance in 1800 something in Egypt?
Muhammad Ali was, sometimes you'll hear him described as the first ruler of modern Egypt, but he came to Egypt as part of the Ottoman army. when the Ottomans expelled the French in 1801, and he was a very smart politician, and he moved himself into a position of power. And eventually the Ottoman Empire made him the governor of Egypt. But he had kind of imperial ambitions of his own. So it was in his lifetime that there was a temporary banishment of public women, which included not only dancers, but also prostitutes, because prostitution was legal in Egypt for many, many centuries. That ban was short-lived, but the repercussions, there had been bans like that at other times in Egyptian history, but this one was a little different because once it was lifted, the regulations of female artists persisted, and they persist even today. Dancers are, of course, heavily regulated in Egypt. So Muhammad Ali Street, when it was constructed in the 1870s, was named after Muhammad Ali, because Khedive Ismail, who constructed the street, that was his grandfather, so it was in honor of him. So it's a great irony that all these artists were on Muhammad Ali Street.
Yes, very ironic. Let's see. I don't know if Muhammad Ali is so happy about that, but we will never know because he's now dead.
He can live with that beyond the grave.
Yeah, he has to. What do you? So I've been to Egypt, but obviously for a very short time and not for like doing research. But what was my impression? I was in a hotel and then they said, "Oh, the belly dancer is coming," and I was so excited. And then someone came who didn't look Egyptian. Like I'm pretty sure she wasn't Egyptian. And the general tone in Egypt, which might shock a lot of belly dancers around the world, but if you go there and you say, "I'm a belly dancer," people might misinterpret that as you being something else. How is it now? How is the standing of a belly dancer nowadays in Egypt? And I mean, in Cairo, it might probably be different because it's a capital, but could you go like, could you give us an overview of?
Sure. The situation of dance and dancers in Egypt has always been fraught and complicated. Egyptians, I often like to say, have a love and hate relationship with this dance form because at the social level, this is a dance that many, if not most, Egyptians participate in and don't feel shame in that at the social level. At a wedding, this baladi, the social dance, is what people do. But crossing the bridge into doing it as a profession is something else because of, for a variety of reasons that, oh my God, we need many more hours to talk about the socio-historical context that led to this. But, because doing the dance as a professional involves commodifying the body, it's basically selling the body in public settings. It's not really just the issue of clothing. Sometimes it's cast that way that, oh, the dancers are scantily clad and that's the problem. But I'm here to tell you a professional dancer could be wearing a burlap sack and still be judged negatively. The issue is doing it for money. And, so among the Egyptian people, the people who end up doing this as a job often come from difficult circumstances. It's rarely a career of choice for Egyptian girls. Even among the big celebrity dancers, when we hear their life stories, often there were very difficult circumstances that propelled them into this, or they came from families where this was the work that the family did. This, for various other reasons, there has been an influx of foreigners. A lot of that has to do with the growth of the international belly dance scene, and that's led a lot of foreigners to try to make their name in Egypt. And foreigners aren't bound by the same social
Hmm.
stigmas that native girls are. And not to say that foreign dancers living and working there have it easy, they don't, but they don't have the same familial issues, social issues that Egyptian girls have. And layer on to that issues of social class, where in high-end venues that are patronized by the elites or that are foreign facing, the tendency in those venues is to fetishize whiteness and Western bodies. And so you tend to see foreigners in high-end settings
Hmm.
for those reasons. It's complicated.
Yeah, it's very, very layered. I really, if if you're watching this, I really urge you to go deeper into the studies. I haven't read your books, but I would read them, but I just like physical books, and it wouldn't. Anyways, read the books and go to the Instagram, and I learned a lot just watching your stories, and how do you say, the little circle, the highlights. Yeah.
Mm.
And in some of those highlights, you're very like you have a very critical view of a lot of things, which I personally find really interesting and which might enlighten, or make, let's just ask questions, and maybe the artist can then ask themselves these questions. For me, like, I'm a seed of what was once called tribal fusion belly dance. And then I moved country. I'm now in Switzerland. Um, I went to a belly dance school. She asked me, "Are you teaching tribal fusion?" And I'm like, "Yes, but no." So I call it fusion belly dance now. With everything, so the fusion is with everything that I have in my body, which is amongst other things, whacking, Brazilian dances like samba, capoeira, and then mixing that with belly dance. But I have people interviewing here, and I interviewed someone recently who is from like a Slavic country, and they also have their tribes there. But then they wear like jewelry from people from Afghanistan. And then when I asked them why they don't change the name tribal, they say that they identify with this. So this is also a multi-layered question. But the question is, what do you think about fusion when no, that's the wrong question. But what, yeah, no, let's let me just open it. What do you think about fusion? Because there are so many different ways, and it started in the US and then kind of swept over to the whole world.
Yeah. Oh, it's a big question, isn't it? I mean, and it's a hard, I understand the struggle of trying to articulate the question, and now I'm going to struggle to articulate an answer because it is complicated. I would argue, and I think a lot of folks, if who watch my stories and my videos will think, "Oh, she must be anti-fusion,"
No,
and
no,
I'm
no.
really, and I'm really not. I'm really not.
Yeah.
What I think that what we struggle with in the United States, and the United States is the root of a lot of
Hmm.
problems in many ways. And I, as a white American person, I always like to point out the kind of disastrous consequences of choices made by white American people that have had repercussions around the world, with them not even really thinking about the consequences of those actions. And when fusion as a belly dance modality evolved in the United States, it emerged at a very particular time in very particular places in American history, and is very reflective of that because it was largely a West Coast phenomenon initially, and it emerged the seeds of it were sown in the 60s and 70s. And in the United States, this was the time of second wave feminism, and particularly in among the people who were pioneering, I will say just belly dance in the United States. with the exception of some of the actual native dancers who migrated to the US to work, the people who kind of set in motion the wheels of what became first fusion, ATS, these kind of modalities were really embedded in that culture of second wave feminism. And that's when we start to see a lot of the crossover of goddess archetypes and ideas of primeval matriarchy and things like that being layered into this dance practice. And these kind of ideas have persisted because of that being the foundation in which the dance was laid here in the States. The problem is then, though, that folks have not continued, as time has worn on, to interrogate the socio-historical context in which this emerged and developed, and how that has flavored fusion approaches over history. And there are definitely a lot of fusion practitioners here. See, I knew the answer would be just as complicated as the question. I think for
Sorry.
me, no, but it's such an important discussion because
Yeah.
the fusion dancers that I respect and admire, like I'll shout out, for example, Drake Von Trapp. Drake is very, very informed about the socio-historical context, the basis upon which his fusions are built. And that is the kind of fusion I can be on board with because it's fusion coming from an informed and respectful place. The problem in the US writ large is that a lot of Americans, and not just in fusion, by the way, but traditional style dancers, don't really examine their practice to think about how it may perpetuate stereotypes about these peoples and cultures that are being mined for our pleasure, how we may be perpetuating Orientalism, how we may be engaging cultural erasure with some of our practice. So it's that for me is the crux of it. Is it informed, respectful fusion, or is it I'm going to do whatever I want because art doesn't belong to anyone? And that is something I can't get on board with.
That was a really good answer to a
Oh,
question
thanks.
that I haven't quite finally formulated. But I think that, the point is being informed, like basing your fusions. If I'm fusing with something, then I should study that something before. And,
Exactly.
its cultural context and maybe where it comes from and when it was created and what's the culture that it comes from and all of that. This is a continuous research. It's not like you study it once and then you teach it for 5 years and you never look at it again because things change. And
Exactly.
yeah, so this conversation, this is also about having this conversation because I mean, I was looking myself for conversations where it wouldn't be a monologue and where it would be like a harmonious way of discussing things without pointing fingers at anyone because as an artist, that's not only doing dance, and for every artist, we know that we are inspired and showered by like beautiful things, and this happens in fashion or in makeup. I
Mm.
also makeup, like makeup. If the history of makeup is again in Egypt, and so if you look at that, yeah, um, I think you're always in the best position when you can really answer uncomfortable questions and you're okay with them being asked.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And to be honest, I feel that a lot of folks who are out there purporting to do traditional, for example, Egyptian dance, need
Mhm.
to reckon with these questions too, because there are a lot of people who are putting themselves out there as doing traditional styles without really necessarily engaging with the complexity within Egyptian culture and not knowing maybe as well as they think they do. And I particularly see that here in the US. We have a lot of problems here.
Hmm. Yeah, but I think that the lens of Orientalism is something that happens in Europe as well. People just sometimes they use the reference of these pictures that were painted by men who at the time couldn't even enter the harem, and it was really just a fantasy. And
Uh-huh.
these pictures then become, a reference for how you dress or something, which is really problematic. But going back to belly dance and to like or Raqs Sharqi or maybe the origin of belly dance, which is really difficult to pinpoint because first it's made by women and women were not then in the position to write stuff. And second, because it was influenced by a lot of different, it's a fusion in itself, isn't it?
In many ways, yes, but I mean, oh, that's another big topic. But one thing I will say from an Egyptian standpoint is this never has been exclusively a woman's dance. Never
Okay.
ever. It's
Okay.
always been a gender neutral dance. And historically, there have been male practitioners, gender non-conforming practitioners. For example, in Egypt, there's a long, long history of effeminate male entertainers who have gone by various designations through
Kawal.
history.
Kawal.
There were the Khawal, but by the way, please use caution using that word among Arabic speakers because in the present day, Khawal is a slur for a male
Oh,
homosexual.
okay.
So using it in an academic context, people understand, but don't blurt that out in a random group of Arabs because
Mhm.
they'll be kind of shocked. But even before the era of the Khawal and the Jenk, there were artists in the medieval period called Mukhannathun
Mhm.
who functioned in much the same way. By the standards of Egyptian society, they were clothed as women, they wore makeup like women, they behaved like women, they danced like women, but they were known to be men. They
Mhm.
weren't trying to pass. And in that way, in a sense, they were a third gender. I don't want to make that seem too like a totally concrete category, but for all intents and purposes, it kind of worked that way. And these kind of entertainers existed in Egypt until quite recently. I have photos of male entertainers from the 50s. And one of my informants in Luxor was telling me about two male artists that she knew who were still active in the 70s. So there's a long history of this. And the problem we get into when tracing the history of what is essentially a folk dance is that it's just not documented beyond a certain point. The other issue is that in Egypt, the Arab conquest that happened in the 7th century was an enormous cultural shift in Egypt. And I often say when I do historical lectures, because a lot of folks want to talk about the ancient origins of belly dance. For sure, there's evidence that something resembling ballady, like social, like torso-based improvisation, goes back to time immemorial. But I really resist trying to draw a lineal connection between the professional artists, say, of the medieval period, the Ottoman period, back prior to that Arab conquest, because what we do have in the documentation from medieval and Ottoman Egypt is that it's very connected to the types of music and dance that were popular elsewhere in the Arabic speaking world. And so I don't find it very fruitful to try to draw the origins back to like pharaonic times because just the evidence doesn't support any concrete conclusions, you
Yes.
know?
I wrote an essay, but my essay is more like a collection of of things that I study and also of my teachers and everything. But I had to, because it's really hard to draw. I drew a point to to pharaonic to the pharaonic how do you say, the court of Nefertiti and Echnaton, and of these there are these little pieces of, as an ostricon of a dancer, I think it's called, and she's backward.
Sure, the deep back bend.
Yeah, she's backward bent in this, and I mean, no one knows if that is belly dance or how the movement of these women looked like. But what you can see is that the ropes were like pretty transparent, and one would maybe also describe it as, I cannot say that it's erotic without seeing the movement, or if the
Mm,
nudity at that time was like a something that is also sacred and not necessarily sexual, or how these things are. But from there, I kind of, it spread out. But then also there's another story or other versions where it started in different places like simultaneously. But
exactly. Yeah, and well, like you have the Greek and Roman accounts of the dancers of Cadiz
mhm.
in what is now the
Spain.
coast
No.
of Spain.
Yeah.
And these were presumably descendants of Phoenicians, which would have been modern day
Mhm.
Lebanon, Palestine, and the description is them with their quivering loins, So movements of these sort, we can trace evidence of movement vocabulary. It's just when it gets into aesthetics and what the audiences found beautiful and musical accompaniment, the flow of performance, those are the things that get very speculative.
Yeah.
Where when we start looking from, the era of like the Abbasids on, where we start to have more documentation and we can say more with confidence. By the way, I don't want to veer off on a tangent, but on the whole issue of sexuality, this
Mhm.
is something that I think a lot of Western dance practitioners really struggle with, but there is a lot of sexuality in belly dance in Egypt.
Is it, how do you mean that? Like how so?
Uh, well, I think that especially in traditional settings, Egyptians are comfortable with the level of sexual innuendo and suggestiveness in the dance that we've been conditioned in Western contexts that, and I know when I was a beginner, I heard this a lot, that belly dance is sensual, never sexual. And then I started researching in Egypt and I said, oh, no, 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 it's sexual. So particularly in wedding settings,
Mhm.
that's where you see the most provocative kind of things. And it makes sense when you think about what the wedding is for.
Fertility.
Because,
A fertility rite
well,
or
it's
birth
not,
baby.
well, yeah, but it's to encourage the couple
Yeah.
to go off and have sex.
Uh-huh.
So there's a lot of the role of the dancer in weddings
Mhm.
is to embody meanings that the polite guests can't. She's kind of a liminal figure. So she can get away with making raunchy jokes and doing provocative gestures and pantomimes and sitting on the lap of the bride and groom and doing pelvic thrusts. And these are all things that happen in traditional Egyptian weddings. So when I see people ganging up like on like some video of some dancer in some nightclub in Cairo, like, oh, look at the way she's moving and she's so scantily clad. And I think, oh, honey, you ain't seen nothing until you've seen a shabby wedding and the things that happen. But if you take those same activities and take that out of that sanctioned social context,
Context, yeah.
then it's perceived differently, of course. But
Mhm.
there's always been sex in belly dance.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting, because I prefer to say that, but it's a sensual dance. But then what, from what I've researched, and is that some of the the movements or what I like comparing things because you in the school where I am now there is an Algerian woman and she kept sending me videos from Algeria of how people dance there and the movements are so different and then the feet movement is very similar to the movements we do in Brazil which came from Africa and so in a lot of African dances, I mean, Egypt is still Africa. I know that some
Mhm.
Egyptians say that they aren't Africans, they are
Oh,
Egyptians, but
that's a whole other
that's a whole
conversation.
other thing. But it's on the continent of Africa, and a lot of the African dances, including like for our fertility dances, when you go to Africa to other places, also Jamaica, and you see the woman moving the the space that they have in their hips and the way that they move it in
Mhm.
all the different angles is just mind-blowing
Oh,
and
sure.
and I think it's all related to that right of I don't want to put it all in that uh, drawer but there's a very big category of fertility dancing.
Yeah, and I think that, it's interesting because, and this kind of circles back to what I mentioned earlier about roots of certain belly dance traditions in the States and the relationship to second wave feminism, because we heard in the United States for years and years, like that there was a childbirth connection with belly dance, childbirth, childbirth. And I'm here to tell you, if you bring that up with people in culture, they look at you like, what the hell are you talking about? Like childbirth is over there. This is something we do for fun. But nevertheless, that very obvious sexuality and eroticism that you see in the dance speaks to this kind of deep connection of the dance to life cycle type things. So I would argue we can't demonstrate like any connection to the childbirth act, but we can demonstrate connection to the stuff that gets you to the point of childbirth.
Yeah, sort of the preliminaries like very hot preliminaries that we
Yeah,
get into.
exactly.
But what I've read another it was actually an April Rose's thesis. I read April Rose's thesis and Suhaila Sanipur thesis. I'm reading a lot of theses now before I interview these people. But before I read it in April Rose's thesis, I saw that somewhere else, I forgot the name, but she mentions it there that she was in Morocco and I I'm not sure about which tribe it was, but it was like a woman was in Morocco and she was invited, and there was a circle of women
Hmm.
doing the belly wave movement that we do, and the woman who was giving childbirth, she was in the
Uh-huh.
middle, and those belly wave movements should help her press the baby out actually. And my one of my dance teachers, she said that she actually used that movement to press her baby out and it helped her. So part of that is works.
I know exactly the account you're talking about. I haven't read April Rose thesis, but I'm pretty confident I know where that is coming from. There's an American dancer out of New York City by the name of Morocco.
Ooh, I
And
wrote it down. Yes,
and yeah, and I have a feeling she was citing Morocco's articles on that subject. Morocco wrote a couple pieces about, I think, two different accounts. One was an account that was told to her
mm-hmm.
by, I think, a woman who may have been from the Gulf. And then the other was this Moroccan account. Um, and
I know it was Dinichu, Carolina Dinichu.
that's her. That's her.
Ah,
Her stage
yes.
name is Morocco.
Oh,
Yes. Yeah.
okay. So
That
she was
article has been floating around since I think the 70s. Again, the time of second wave feminism. And
okay, so she didn't actually see that?
she saw one of them.
Okay.
Okay. But without being fluent in the language and
Mm.
without following up on that one incident, you know, that does not a comprehensive proof of this hypothesis make? You know what I mean? Like if I am popping into some ceremony or some family occasion and I'm not fluent in the language, I'm depending on translation, and I see this one time and then I do no follow-up research on this,
I understand.
that's that article. That article has been a plague on historians like me for years because there's no denying that one experience, but any researcher will tell you a sample of one
Hmm.
is not the basis for a theory.
It's not enough. Every scientist will tell you the same. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And also, there is it is quite possible, maybe some kind of ritualized pantomiming of movement, but that's not what Raqs Sharqi is
Hmm.
in the cultures of origin or how it's perceived. That's not the meanings that are attached to it by and large by those peoples. Again, if you go to Egypt and ask the average person, is belly dance something that started in childbirth rituals? They'll look at you like you just fell out of the moon. Because again, for them, the only meaning that they will explicitly ascribe to it is, oh, it's farfasha, it's fun. It's something we do for fun.
That is so interesting and so enlightening because there should be fun in this dance, and you actually see a lot of
Yeah.
people having fun with themselves and with the audience,
Yes.
which is quite different for like fusion dancers. There's no such interaction anymore, but I see that a lot with like the more classical belly dancers.
I often think that when I watch fusion performance, I think, you can be happy sometimes.
Yeah, you can smile.
And
Yeah.
it bums me out because sometimes, like in the US scene, often there's this very hard dichotomy of either you're cabaret or you're tribal, which all is a false dichotomy too, because the things that get lumped together under cabaret are not all part of the same thing. But there's a tendency to stereotype if you do cabaret that it's all like flirtation and for the male gaze. And it's really not, because in the culture of origin, yeah, that can be part of it. But also, you will see people push their little kids out onto the dance floor to enjoy watching them dance. You'll see people dancing with their grandparents and their cousins. So, Raqs Sharqi is ultimately rooted in
Pleasure.
fun. And
Yeah, fun. I would love to continue. I think we're gonna be stopped because for 40 minutes. I'm gonna ask you if you will be up to a part two, which is
yeah,
like,
of course.
can we do it like now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Then I'm gonna stop it here. Watch out for part two. Let me
Okay.
just